Welcome back to the James McGee Show. I am your host. I am James McGee. I hope you had a good weekend. And for those of you who had a long weekend, I hope you had a long weekend. I had a very good one. So let's dive into this. You know, it seems like every day we're talking about Minnesota. And we're going to keep talking about Minnesota as long as it is the most important topic in America. You know, some people say, and one of the guests on my show last week said, you don't care about Minnesota, let it burn. And I agree with that to an extent. Minnesota has brought, this is not something new. Minnesota has brought this on themselves in the last probably 10 years. And it came to light 5 years ago, the way they handled George Floyd. And it's the same pieces of shit, Tim Walz, Ilhan Omar, and Jacob Fry, and they're still somehow, some way in charge. So Minnesota kept them in charge after that. And so they get what they deserve. So I don't have sympathy for Minnesota. But where we're going to keep talking about this is a precedent-setting moment for our entire country. What is happening in Minnesota is not just about Minnesota. It is something that can happen. And if we don't get a grip on this, these other states, the other, especially red states, you could flip real quick if we don't get a grip on this. So, you know, you've got the shooting of the woman by the ICE agent. Now you have several thousand agents that are, in Minnesota. You've got federal courts weighing in on limiting federal tactics. It's a complete mess. So this is just not about Minnesota. You know, every day we hear, and this is my main focus today, is the constitutional right. Constitutional right. Okay. Never seen the Constitution misinterpreted, stretched, and abused the way that it is. We have a right to protest. No, you don't have a right to protest. If you are walking around saying we have a right to protest, we have a right to this, then you have no idea. You've never read the Constitution. You have no idea what the fuck you are talking about. Well, let me tell you what your rights are. You don't have a right to protest. The Constitution says nothing about protest. The Constitution says you have a right to peacefully assemble. Period. You have a right to free speech. Not the full range of actions that you are seeing every single day. Let me tell you what you don't have a right to do. And I have the documentation to back it up. Let me tell you what you don't have a right to. You don't have a right to riot. You don't have a right to cause chaos. You don't have a right to block roads. You don't have a right to scream obscenities. You don't have a right to intimidate on people and spit on people and abuse people and batter people. You do not have a right to create madness and dress it up as virtue. You do not. You know what you have a right to do? You have a right to assemble, which means you have a right to stand. You have a right to hold a sign and talk peacefully. You have a right to do these things without trampling on the rights of everyone else, which is being done every single day. Look at what happened in the church Sunday. This movement has turned loud, disruptive, destructive, and needs to be stopped. The rights of every other American citizen is what matters here. Our nation will survive on peace, not the selective rage that is being demonstrated right now. You have a right to stand, you have a right to assemble, to be heard, but you don't have a right to cause chaos, havoc. You don't. So whoever told you you have these constitutional rights, they're wrong, and they're about to get you in a lot of trouble. So Minnesota, it's hard to call them leadership, Minnesota leadership, because they're not leaders. The leaders who are in place in Minnesota they're disgraceful. They are derelict, is saying it nicely. They are corrupt. They are just an absolute embarrassment to the nation. What they are allowing, the fact that arrests have not been made yet for what happened Sunday in a Christian church, because a ICE agent goes to that church. The ICE agent wasn't even there. Headed by Don Lemon. The fact that they're not in jail yet says everything. Can you imagine that if this was a mosque? Even if it was a black Christian church, what do you think would have happened by now? Arrest? Arrest? It would be just, what would the arrest say nicely? You know what would be happening if it was that, but it was white Christians, and now it's okay. So why hasn't Minnesota authorities? They care about one group, the bad guys, the evil ones, the criminals. That's who they care about. I understand that it was Sunday and yesterday was a holiday, but Pam Bondi, listen up. You are absolutely pathetic. You have, to the end of the day, the American people, the American conservative, is demanding that Don Lemon and the rest of these animals, these complete savages who terrorized, that is terrorism, who terrorized this church, is not arrested. We're demanding they arrested by 4 p.m. today. That's what we're demanding. We're demanding they're arrested by 4 p.m. today. The conservative Americans who elected this administration in office. It's enough. So let's get back to Minnesota, what they're allowing. Just described what you're allowed to do in this peaceful assembly that the Constitution grants you. Disorderly conduct. I have it right here. So disorderly conduct is a misdemeanor in the state of Minnesota. A misdemeanor involving actions like brawling, fighting, that's happening. Disrupting assemblies, that is happening. Engaging in noisy, offensive, or abusive conduct in language. Oh my God, it's happening every second, every minute of every day. Knowing it will likely alarm, anger, or disturb others, or provoke a breach of peace. My God, this is Minnesota law. This is not federal law. They say, well, we don't enforce federal law. This is Minnesota law. That's you, Chief O'Hare, you fucking clown. That's what you've sworn to do. Why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you officers out there arresting these people for this every single day? They have no right to do that. No right. Honking horns. Horns, and this is, again, in the state of Minnesota. This is a Minnesota law. Minnesota statute 169.68 prevents horn blowing for things like anger, road rage, greetings, or general alerts. General alerts like alerting citizens that ICE is coming. You can't blow your horn. You know what your horn can be used for? To prevent accidents. When you need to give an audible warning to avoid danger. And danger is not sworn law enforcement officers doing their job. It is against Minnesota law to blow your horn for what they're using for right now. So why, Chief O'Hare, aren't your officers enforcing that law? You say you don't enforce federal law, but that's not federal law. That is state law. Do your fucking job. Blocking roadways. Something that Renee Good and her wife and a group of others had been doing every day. It is against Minnesota state law. Chief O'Hara, you say you don't enforce federal law. This is state law. Why aren't you enforcing it? They're not allowed under Minnesota statute 160.2715. They are not allowed to obstruct roadways in the state of Minnesota. Why are you allowing it every single day? So this is your fault. This is Tim Walz's fault. This is Ilhan Omar's fault. This is all of your faults. If you would have been doing your job, Chief O'Hara, instead of being on 60 Minutes trying to be famous, if you would have been doing your job, none of this would happen. If people like Renee Good would not have been allowed to break 3 laws, the 3 laws I just mentioned, if they wouldn't have been allowed to break those 3 laws, she would be alive today. If you, Chief O'Hara, would have done your job. But you didn't. You failed. You are a complete failure. You are a complete embarrassment to the profession that I spent my life working in. And I am so disappointed that somebody like you is allowed to be you shouldn't be allowed to be a directing traffic at an elementary school, much less the chief of police of a large United States city. Let's look at this clown, complete clown.
For simply appearing to be Somali or appearing to be Latino or appearing to be foreign. And it's concerning because we also know we're not getting these stories from Irish folks and Norwegian folks here.
Our officers are conducting targeted enforcement, looking for the worst.
I'm stunned that a man this dumb could be a police chief. So let me give you a little bit of lesson on the Supreme Court, since you apparently don't read anything what the Supreme Court has said. The Supreme Court has ruled that on immigration enforcement, you can racially profile. If you have a race that is illegally entering or staying in our country, that is your target, as long as it is consistent, then you can profile. If you're Irish or Norwegians, do we have an influx? Did over the last 4 years, did Joe Biden let a bunch of Irishmen in, a bunch of Norwegians in? And you only said Irish because you're Irish. So you are the racist. You're a complete clown. These ICE agents, that is so irresponsible that you get on TV and say something like that when you know they have a right to do that. You know they have a right under the law, and the Supreme Court has ruled they can do that. But you had to go be a clown. You had to go and pander that little fucking weasel Jacob Fry. Well, you were sworn to uphold the Constitution. You were sworn to protect the people. Your allegiance is not to Jacob Fry or any other politician. Your oath was to the citizens of the United States. You're a fucking embarrassment. Then you also said in the same conversation on 60 Minutes that while your city's being burnt, you're on 60 Minutes. That shows everything about you. It's the cop's fault for standing in front of the car. Oh, really? You know, I'll say one thing. Wasn't ideal. Wasn't his fault. So I guess you tell rape victims They shouldn't have wore the short skirt, shouldn't have wore a low-cut shirt. That's what you tell rape victims. Same thing, right? You piece of shit. It wasn't the cop's fault. It was Renee Good and her wife's fault. They made a choice that day. The choice cost her her life and altered a hard-working law enforcement officer. Let's talk a little more about what the Constitution protects as far as the freedom of assembly. The First Amendment ensures people can gather and express views, even unpopular ones, on public property. Okay? They have a right to petition, guarantees the right to ask the government to address grievances. Here is limited and restrictions that nobody's talking about. Why am I the only one talking about these limits and restrictions that the government, you don't just have free reign. You can't just go barge into churches and terrorize people like Don Lemon and his group did. We're going to cover more of that tomorrow because I'm hoping they're in a prison. They're in jail by tomorrow. You know, we're going to cover that more in depth tomorrow. But they don't have a right to just run free range and cause chaos. The government, nobody's talking about this. This is no different than parades and things like that. You can require permits. You can give the time and the place and the manner on public property in which they protest. You can give them a designated area. I've been involved in that. I've done it. You can give them a designated area and say, this is your area. You don't have to let them run free throughout your city, block roads and intimidate and harass. It doesn't give them a right to harass people. Protections of the Constitution of the right to assemble does not extend to criminal acts, intimidation, or inciting immediate violence. Oh, inciting immediate violence? Like what Tim Walz and Ilhan Omar and Jacob Fry is doing? They're not protected under the Constitution. So why aren't those three disgraceful animals in jail yet? The Constitution does not give them coverage for that, does not give them protection for that. I am calling on Pam Bondi to finally get off her ass and do her job. She has talked so much shit. I supported her. I was a fan at first, but the way she has handled a lot of things, quit talking shit, quit tough guy acting, and do your job or step aside and let somebody else come in and do it. I'm going to say it again. I understand Sunday was Sunday and yesterday was a holiday. Today, by 4 p.m., we, the American people, the American conservative, who elected this administration, are demanding that Don Lemon and the rest of the animals that committed a domestic terrorism act in a church, a Christian church, be arrested today. So Mama Luke of the day is Chief Brian O'Hara. You need to resign. I'm not saying a whole lot. You're a Mama Luke. You're a piece of shit. You are an embarrassment to Mama Luke's. You're an insult to Mama Luke's. You're a piece of shit. You're a terrible person. You're a puppet. Do your community, and especially the officers of the Minnesota Police Department, a favor. Finally give them some service. Resign today. Until tomorrow, 7 a.m. Central Standard Time. Remember, nobody's coming to save you, and the world does not give a fuck. McGee is